I have been praised for a lot of things over the last decade plus of self-employment. My work ethic, my drive, my ability to manage a calendar of commitments and appointments that send most people into utter overwhelm just by looking at it. And I won't lie, there have been times when all of that felt good. Hey, look, I can accomplish more than the average person. I can be more productive. I can create systems for myself and abide by those systems no matter what, so that I can get 12 hours of work done in 10. And right now, as we approach the end of the year, all of this might start to sound really attractive to you. With the endless advertisements and sales pitches hidden as encouragements that this will be the year you'll hit all of your goals. Follow that new system or do the new thing. Buy this journal and you too can be like me, fitting in 12 hours of work into 10. I hope you're starting to sense my underlying tone here, my friends. This obsession with productivity, at least here in the US, is not exactly healthy. Instead of using those systems to fit 12 hours of work into 10, what I should have been doing is fitting 8 hours of work into 6, and then getting up from my desk and going for a freaking walk. I am most definitely not the only one out there that's been praised and rewarded for their ability to manage multiple things at once. Gerald Brown knows this life far too well. And on today's episode, she and I are debunking our often lauded ability to do all the things. And we're peeling back the curtain on a bit of why we do so many things. Now, if you've ever talked to Gerald or listened to her own podcast, which is called Unraveling, and you should totally go search for it in whatever app you are listening to right now, it's going to come as no surprise that we get into the big philosophical questions, still around how we make a living from the things we make, but a little less pragmatic than you might expect of me. You'll see what I mean right after this brief word from our sponsor.
Hello, I'm Bryce, Account Manager and Sales Solutions Supervisor at Amico Brett, providing you with the best customer service in ceramics. This episode is brought to you by Amico Brett. Find Amico glazes and equipment at your local distributor. Welcome to Clay, and thank you for listening.
Now, on with the show. Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of 13 years, Rebecca Ikes-Kara. Hey, Gerald, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, this is a better intro, us laughing. Yeah.
It's more authentic to actually the last 10 minutes of us talking that wasn't recorded. I love it. I love it. What's up? How's it going?
Good, pretty good. Yeah. Oh, it's Friday. I was about to say it's Thursday. I have a little bit more flexibility on my Fridays. I'm in the process of learning Spanish, so I had Spanish class right before we met, which is good.
Okay, this is the perfect example of why I wanted to have you on this podcast, because I genuinely do not know all the things that you do. So many projects going.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to express them to the world, but I think I try to, not to like throw everything into a bucket immediately, like what I've been chasing in terms of my next season for Unraveling is how to live a full life and how art is a part of that vehicle of that fullness. So lately, I've been really unexpectedly chasing this kind of desire in my own personal life. One thing that I've been really wanting to do since I was very little is become fluent in Spanish or become fluent in a language. And I chose Spanish as my first language. And in preparation for an upcoming trip, I started looking to find how I can connect with a tutor. And I found this amazing platform called Preply. It's kind of like a pay what you can situation where you can, it's actually really broad in terms of.
I'm writing this down.
Preply. PLY for anybody else who wants to,
Learn languages.
try it out. It's actually a really cool skill sharing model for people all around the world. It's like tutors from everywhere. And it's primarily kind of marketed, I think, as a language accessibility thing, but they have stuff from UX, UI design, art history, ACT prep, like everything.
Wow. Almost like a teachable, but with
Yes.
open source teachable. But all right, well,
Exactly.
before we get into all of that, because I
I know.
already have follow-up questions, I'm going to make yourself introduce yourself to anybody who's listening and doesn't immediately know this voice.
I know, my bad. You know, see how I was doing it. I just like front loaded you.
You're good. You're good. So how would you introduce yourself?
My name is Gerald A. Brown. I'm a sculptor, curator, thinker, human being, originally from South Side of Chicago, currently live in Philadelphia, hold multiple hats across different organizations. But I think what I'm most proud of is my work with Unraveling, which is my podcast that I started a couple years ago, as well as my nonprofit project that I do with my best friend, Mike Tavares, who also was on the show, and you should definitely listen to it if you guys have not.
I will pull up that episode number and put it in the show links. I should have thought to look at it. I knew we would have referenced him today. I should have looked up that number
it's
before.
Not good. Mike is a hero. And one of the things I love from that episode that he was able to communicate was his non-negotiables. It's like, yes, bro, talk about it. Yes.
So good. So good. Well, actually, take us back. How did you get into making, into sculpture? Or I'm thinking that's looped into how you and Mike met. Like,
yeah, totally.
I feel like there's such a rich story there.
Yeah. So Mike and I have been, close friends, best friends since college. We both went to Syracuse University. And Mike, in his freshman year, discovered clay, started working in the creative department. But I didn't find it till about a year and a half later, where I was taking my first throwing class with our mentor, Peter Biesicker, phenomenal man with big ideas and loves to really inject them into students. I think his work also prompts that. So he's kind of like a full circle human being with kind of really digging into questions and why. And so I think Mike and I were both just enamored by that hook of what ceramics could be, this natural material that speaks to our life, our ancestry, our community, just things that feel intangible, but yet when we touch this material, it's like we've known it the whole time. And so I went to Antigua my first year when I was taking clay, 2016. It was the 50th anniversary. Mike was actually the assistant for Sharif Bey and Danny McDonald, who was dually on the stage, which is absolutely magical. And I feel like we both just got hooked into the field. He had been to Antigua previously in Providence, but I think that really made us infatuated with learning and wanting to explore, especially with meeting different artists, especially different Black legendary ceramic artists in the field. We just felt hungry to be a part of this lineage. And so I think through working at Syracuse, we were like, if we want to explore this, we need a sparring buddy. And Mike and I just not only connected on a personal level, like really enjoyed similar music, food, funny comedy specials. We also really pushed each other in the studio, really asked hard questions. A lot of times there was this funny moment in junior year where we both were working on like these secretive conceptual work that we would make only at night when nobody was there, and we would work together. And we didn't even really talk about it a whole lot with each other. We just kind of like asked for certain things here and there. But when we got to Crit and kind of unveiled this thing. And so it was a really good way to feel like we could be connected and have this confidant to help express things that we might have felt troubled by at the time as young college students, but also somebody to grow with in terms of this field that is so huge and can sometimes feel lonely.
I love the term sparring partner, right? Because it's like you are pushing each other in almost an aggressive kind of a way when you have a sparring partner, but you're not fighting that person. You're not
off the blood.
Right. And you're getting in the ring together to do something together in a collaborative way that you're each going to be better for, but you're not getting in the ring as competitors.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah, I think that is the best description of like how our relationship started. Mm-hmm. And then I think as we started to get extremely comfortable and started to grow in our own skill sets, we started to see each other as siblings. We started to feel like I can call on you when things are rough, if I need help or if I just need a laugh. Like that relationship went from friend to kind of coworkers or sparring partners to family really quickly. We felt a part of this larger community. There was two other grad students at the time who kind of had a sibling dynamic, and we inherited that relationship separately. Like Daniel Rogero was kind of somebody that I connected to. Pete Smith, I was about to say Pete Beason. Pete Smith was somebody Mike connected to, and they had a sibling, bickering sibling kind of dynamic. And then Mike and I kind of inherited that. So through that model, we started to figure out what we needed to thrive in the field and thus what was lacking in the field. And so as we started to participate in more seekers and working with our mentor, Peter, we started to inquire, how can we show up in the field and make this accessible? Because we're like, this is a gift that we get to be here. You know, when we were growing up, we didn't really have access to a lot of these ideas and topics, and Clay, just to put it bluntly, didn't have access to Clay. And so how can high school students be further along than where we were? Like, how can we leverage all the resources of 5,000 people coming to this one city and being excited about this material and bring that to students? So I think more than ever, sometimes people see clay symbols as just like the tangible of like these workshops. But time and time again, Mike and I are trying to refine the theology or the philosophy behind what clay symbols is. It's a relationship to your community and to yourself. And how do you form those bonds to help make the strength of both be as high as they can?
I was just going to ask you to like give everybody the elevator pitch of what Clay Siblings is, kind of, you know, for anybody who hasn't heard about it, who doesn't know what you're doing, who wants to get involved and help support. Like, so is it always connected? Is it always workshops connected to NCECA when everybody's like descending upon a city? I didn't know, because you guys are doing I've seen some other stuff, right?
Yeah, we started off like that because that was the easiest way to convince high school students that clay is real. When you got 5,000 people in their city for this material, it's hard to like, I guess you got a point if like all these people are here.
Everybody walking around in their lanyards like, oh, there's more people.
Yeah, you know, they're like, what? This is the thing. And then we got a chance to bring them to the conference. So it started off as that.
Why can't I get lunch at my favorite spot right now? Because there's way too many people here.
Exactly. So the quick and dirty pitch we usually, or that I usually say, is we provide free ceramic workshops to high school students around the country. So that can be inclusive to NCECA. It can be, we've done stuff away from NCECA. We're actually planning in 2022 to do workshops, summer workshops in Providence, Rhode Island, to kind of simulate a craft school experience. So 2 weeks of just pure making, and then having a show after that to give students a more intense opportunity, because previously a lot of the workshops were only like 2 or 3 days. So it was really quick, but we partnered with local institutions, organizations, community leaders to help sustain the spark that we created, but we wanted to have a more invested timeline. But I think now, as we're evolving, Mike and I have gone through different personal challenges. And so the project has had to ebb and flow and be rethought through. We still have a high priority with workshops for high school students, because for me, at least, the reason why I think high school students is the best time is because you're young enough to still be inspired and not rigid by jaded ideas, and you're old enough to take advantage of what we're giving you. You know, sometimes working with middle school students is really a joy and it's exciting, but they're still trying to figure out how to use their body, how to just exist in the world, which is great. It's beautiful. But I think the strength of clay symbols is to be able to inject this idea, and then they are able to carry the torch however they see fit.
Yeah.
But I think, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, we really are about the conceptual philosophy of clay siblings. It's not just about the workshops. We did high school workshops. We did a college workshop at Westchester University in 2022, where we presented this idea about how to be an active member in your ecosystem. And so we took the model of clay siblings, right? We were college students. We loved this material. We saw there was an issue, and we used the amount of resource, skill sets, and intelligence we had at the time to create this entity. And that itself is bigger than clay, right? Like we want to inspire people to be not only empowered to be able to activate the spaces that they're in, but also feeling supported and seeking foundational support with like different people that are around them that they might not see as like somebody that can impact change, right? Like we were just working with local high school teachers where sometimes they're just like so exhausted, so like inundated with so many things. They're like the backbone of this country, but the backbone really carries a lot of strength, you know, and the backbone gets tired, right? The backbone can be prone to scoliosis, right? So I think that
scoliosis.
Yeah, man, too much pressure, not enough support, you know. So
the backbone needs a chiropractic appointment on a weekly basis.
Exactly. And so I think that, you know, that workshop was very different because I think initially we were like, okay, how do we bring these college students and like help create workshops for high school students in an area? But Westchester University is a pretty complex, affluent area. Not all of it is affluent, but it's really interesting socioeconomic makeup. And so it felt like it would be trying to force a square into a circle hole kind of situation. So we were like, these students have all the resources in the world. We're connected to the Department of Ceramic head. How can we bring what we do to them and help strengthen what they do? And we were able to have two amazing proposals that were pitched by students. So we presented them this idea and they actually had to do it. Like it was an assignment. They had to do it, think it through, write it out. And then we were able to fund two proposals. One was gender affirming care for gender fluid students on campus to help find different clothing or affirming clothing to support them. And the other one was recycling old weights, like different exercise materials that are kind of like recycled to bring in new stuff into the university, how to create a smaller bank of tools that people could check out if they wanted to lead their own personal exercise tutorials and things like that. So it was like really complex ideas. The students just saw like, these are resources that are already in the area. I see an issue. Here's my proposal. And we got to fund, give $1,000 to starting both projects. So I think ultimately Clay Siblings wants to continue to work in the ceramics field, but it's not limited to that. And as we think about how the art field is changing or has always had a lack of support with, you know, people feeling sustained professionally, Mike and I are like in the thick of it at 27, trying to navigate our own lives. The complexity of trying to encourage high school students to join a field or participate in a material, but then also feeling equally challenged ourselves about how do we sustain ourselves. So I think as we grow, the project grows and continues to expand. I know I said a whole lot, I didn't leave a lot of room for questions. So,
I've got questions. I've got lots of them.
I think ultimately I think a lot of people are wondering like, where is Clay Siblings? And I think that, you know, we have not went anywhere. We're still doing what we do. But I think the model is much bigger than just workshops for high school students. I think we want to continue to do this work, but see how it can be adaptable and really holistically supporting people, not just a small niche group, and then not seeing what that niche group needs outside of that moment when you support them.
I'm smirking over here because you didn't know this, but the way you just described this kind of evolution of Clay Siblings is exactly what I feel like I have always experienced of you as a person, that you bring these bigger subjects in. I was joking before we hit record that when like you first reached out before you started your podcast, you asked me big process, like meaning of life questions, to where I was like, girl, I don't know. I just plug a mic into my computer and start talking. And so it's just such a beautiful reflection.
I mean, I just like shoot from the hip or not at all, you know? Like,
but every time we talk, it's always like a way bigger picture than just that one thing. And it's so amazing to me. And also, I'm like, shit, I got to think bigger, man. It's incredible. I don't know.
Thank you.
Where does that, like, I don't even know where that comes from. That's just, I don't have a question. That's just a reflection of what I see as you and everything you've been doing. Like, even when, you know, you were getting Unraveling started up, it was like, this is bigger than just conversations about, you know, stuff we make.
Yeah, I appreciate that sentiment. And I think there is a question in there, like, not necessarily where did this come from, but I think a little bit, how does it keep coming up? Because it's not like it just shows up in one area. It's kind of like this never ending reservoir that keeps regurgitating, or maybe more of a geyser. Like it's a geyser that just kind of keeps shooting up hot steam. But I think like a little bit of that is my mom. My mom is an amazing human being that has always somebody who's poked this bear of why or curiosity. She always has this phrase about trying new things. She's just like, then you ain't gotta never wonder why, you know? You just like, now you have this information. And sometimes it's a little bit reckless because I'm like, yeah, man, maybe we could have went about it a different way and maybe we could have achieved that. But I think that kind of structure coming from that kind of foundation has been very important. But I think my friends are people who feed into that. And I have three beautiful best friends, Mara, Asayo, and Mike. And I think each of them offer different questions in different parts of my life. And so as somebody who deeply loves questions and often has too many in my brain, I have people around me who are constantly seeking that similar desire and also bringing questions to me. So it's kind of like this pendulum swinging back and forth of questions going out, questions coming in. And I think, at least with Unraveling, the reason why I love that sensation of this pendulum is because then you're like, can find satisfaction and curiosity in anything, like if you just have that connection with your own intuition and your own internal being of what satisfies you, then I think you're always like at a state of questioning why that satisfies you and why that might be promoting deep interrogation or deep introspection in a beautiful way, right? It doesn't have to always be scary. It can be something that's like, I really love the way this glaze does this. Why? Or Mike and I used to play this game where it's kind of like 4 categories where they're like work that I like and would make similar choices, work that I don't like but would make similar choices, work that I like but would not make similar choices, or work that I do not like and would not make similar choices. And I think,
oh, I like this.
That game used to be such a fun way to pick at habits or patterns that you subconsciously are drawn towards. And it's often the work that you don't like but would make similar choices is the work that is where the money is, because then you're like, there's something that is working, but I think I would do it differently. Or there's something that I might be apprehensive to trying, but I secretly enjoy.
So questions like that, I feel like are often the bane of my existence in a way. But I try to, create joy around them rather than misery.
I think if you can get in front of the question and drive the ship, you have a better chance at discovering more about yourself than letting it drive you. I mean, you can avoid it. Sometimes it's going to drive you. But if you can allow yourself to be a part of the process, I think there's much more pleasure to receive.
Well, and I feel like when I hear the questions come from you, it doesn't feel like that. And I don't know if you had this experience in like formal education of the arts. Sometimes you get into the like meaning of life, what is art with a capital A? And I'm just kind of like, I just want to use my hands. I just want to make some shit. Like, that's what I like. And period. Whereas like, I don't roll my eyes when you ask those questions. That's what I'm getting at. Right. Because like, there's still an undercurrent of pragmatism around like, how are you doing what you're doing? Why are you doing what you're doing? But also like, how does this work? Right. And that's the question I'm always interested in is like, how does this, especially you mentioning like that being late 20s now at this point. I'm laughing because I realized we're literally 10 years apart. I just had my birthday.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize how young Mike and I are. I think there's just like this effect that we're just like present and doing a lot of stuff. So we must be old. But I'm like, we are very much just babies.
But it's an interesting time, right? Because I remember, even if it was a decade ago, that like when you first come out of school, you can kind of like, for lack of a better phrase, put up with a lot of stuff, right? Like it's cool to be in the like the cheap apartment, one broke, to the like living on your own, even if it's a dingy apartment and there's 2 drafty of windows, whatever, you're on your own, you're making it work. Like no big deal if you're eating ramen every night of the week because you're making it work. But then there comes this point where it's like, all right, I need something more to sustain me, but I still want to make this art. I still want to do this thing. And how does that pragmatically move forward with the big questions that you're talking about too? Like,
that is, it's hard to hold both, I think. But I think instinctually I have no choice. Like, I think that's what I do best at is like holding 2 things at the same time, but also another show that I really like. we can do hard things, right? Like we can handle both of these things simultaneously. I feel like I'm trying to let the pleasure drive me, and not get caught up in the circumstance, but also being like standards, right? Baseline standards, I think that's how I try to mitigate more harm than what I need to. But I think ultimately surrounding myself with people who are trying to channel the same things has also been very helpful, because I think when you're coming up and you're surrounded by people who all think like that, right? Like we're all like just making it work. Yeah, ramen. Yeah, like no hot water. Yeah, right. But over time, that gets really gruesome to bear, and then you
Yes.
begin to question, like, is this all I'm worth? This is all I can achieve. So having people around me who are asking those bigger questions and saying, yes, I do deserve better has allowed me to also own that and reinforce that, like, I deserve standards, and that doesn't have to compromise the pleasure that I seek in the big questions and being just like in the moment for things, trying to do both.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I also think we talked a little bit about this before, like in the arts world, especially, we're all kind of used to use a terrible phrase, bootstrapping, right? Like we're used to like making do with little resources because the arts is not exactly the career choice we make for the 401k. Like we're not, nobody's quote unquote doing it for the money. They're doing it for the love. And so then this becomes this narrative of kind of like the way people live is romanticized. Like the simplicity is romanticized, and like there is benefit in a lot of it because high commercialism and consumerism, and that's a whole different subject. But at the same time, doing it out of a principle and a value because you don't want to fall into consumerism is a different place to come from than doing it out of necessity because you have no choice. And I think they get conflated in our world, in our industry.
Yeah, I think this is a topic that I'm really battling with. And I think like ultimately, I don't want to feel like I don't have any agency over my body. I think that that's really, really difficult to accept. And is part of the reason why I think the last couple of years have been very difficult for me, in addition to a few people know I was sick and I was going through a lot of changes. And I think I became highly acutely aware of this issue in a way that I think I've been naive about. I think I was I was aware of it because I'm aware of racism, capitalism, all that shit. But I think that I became acutely aware of it and how, like, as a field, we don't have a safety net. And that really specifically targets marginalized people across the board, but particularly people who have like deep, high intersections, like people who have different, disabilities or medical needs, people, different sexualities, genders, people of different, immigration statuses, different language barriers, like not even to get specifically, like literally speaking to the structure of this country, deeply tied capitalism to racism because of how everything is founded. So I think this field feels so complex in a way where I feel grateful to be or to choose to be an artist, because compared to other fields, these heightened isms are almost like highly suffocating, like to be in corporate America, to be in these things that are not neurodivergent, accessible. Like there's just so many things that could really have made my life much, like, I think the reason why I'm able to have big questions is because of my desire for life, because of my desire for people, and having a field that has, in theory, the flexibility to accommodate the different identities I hold is what allows me to still be energized by that desire for life. But I think ultimately this field is crashing, like in a lot of ways. And it's because of the lack of safety net. And somebody like me who is very ubiquitous, right? Like I'm everywhere, right? That is not by accident. It is because I literally cannot sustain myself if I am not. And so therefore, I'm a person of high quality, so I'm not going to do something half-assed. So then that means my threshold for, really making things efficient and really beautiful are like up here, which causes deep burnout and exhaustion. And so I think that in a lot of ways, we are all having to really reckon with what does it mean to be an artist right now? And what does it mean to support ourselves? I think these are questions that I am regrettably thinking about really intensely. But I think the way I've been able to spin it in a positive manner is my connection to the globe, like really wanting to feed that desire. I have a trip coming up to Oaxaca, Mexico, a place that I've always like heard immense, beautiful things about. And not just in ceramics, literally, I remember in college, I was reading something for like my African American studies class and something about Oaxaca showed up. Or I was looking at this beautiful textile that I bought and it was a tag that said made in Oaxaca. So it was like all these little things that I kept getting inundated with. And I remember storing them in. And it was like, I really want to become, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I really want to become fluent in Spanish. And I was like, I really want to visit Oaxaca. What is stopping me from visiting? And I think that is how I've been able to combat a little bit of the hopelessness I feel with these other things that I'm navigating. Because one, Oaxaca is like this craft capital, right? Like clay is very important down there. Like they're known for this black clay, but also textiles, printmaking, literally a culinary capital, like has some of the most delicious food, a staple for mezcal. Like shout out to my homie Tati Hernandez. Like I'm hoping to link with them when I'm down there. Art and craft is bigger than just the United States, right? Living and breathing art as a lifestyle, as a full expanded thing is bigger just in the United States. And I think I'm hoping to learn how people not only sustain themselves, but how this full life experience, this desire for life in these different ways can create new practices with my relationship to art and my relationship to my job. And I'm hoping that, you know, traveling to Oaxaca just leads me to traveling to another country, which leads me to maybe living somewhere else for a little bit. I think that ultimately, like, the world is too big to feel like we don't deserve place in it. And, you know, all the beautiful questions that I'm asking, I know will just amplify the more I see the world. So I'm hoping that, you know, the things that I begin to ponder about, I can bring that back to people, or I can share that with people, and people can start to see a better light, see a better path for ourselves in a way that breeds interconnectedness, but also allows us to just, I think ultimately just be. Like, I think that this insustainability allows us to question so much about if we deserve to even exist. You know, let me speak for myself. It has questioned my own understanding if I deserve to exist, because I'm doing everything right? Like, people enjoy what I do. I'm helping the community. I'm creating new ideas. Like, I should just be, right? And yet I cannot sustain myself. And so that's prompting these questions that feel very negative and pointed at myself. And so I'm wanting to, one, expand that circle, break that mold, and live amongst other people, help understand how people live amongst these ideas to expand my understanding. I hope that makes sense. I really ran with some grip.
That's fine.
Man, you got to cut me off at the knees sometimes. I'll just be like, yo, G.
Hold on. No, it totally makes sense, because I think right now, and I'm going to put us in the same generation, because, you know, even if it is a 10-year difference, I think what we've experienced is like, because I did it by the book. I did all the things on the checklist that you were supposed to do, but it just so happens that when you walk out of school at 2009, when everything's crashing, it doesn't matter that you've got a 4.0. It doesn't matter that you got the internship. It doesn't matter that you had the whatever you were supposed to do, because nobody's hiring anybody. I mean, like, I switched to graphic design because I thought that was the safe art, right? Like, that was the safe, employable route. That's how I was going to get hired. Didn't work out that way, you know? And so it's this kind of, I'll make sure to put the little explicit marker on this episode. It's a mind fuck because you're like, wait a second, I did the things I was told I was supposed to do. Why isn't this working? And to the point you've already, you know, beautifully made, it's like, well, it wasn't built to work in the first place, you know? And so then we've got to figure out a new way around. And I also think that the insult to injury, for my brain at least, is I always because I get so stuck in that, well, how does this work conversation of, in the arts, everybody's constantly telling us, you know, to not rush the process, that we need time to percolate on these ideas. We need time to explore. I mean, even in like skills accrual, craftsmanship in clay, it takes time to get better at doing what we're doing, to be able to throw even cylinders and throw repeatedly and all of this type of stuff. But at the same time, you can't you can't have that time if you don't have a way to pay your bills outside of that.
Yep.
And so it's kind of like, how am I supposed to have the space to like sit in this and percolate in this and come up with these grand ideas? And, you know, who is the philosopher that had that like build a house out in the woods? Was it a philosopher or like, you know what I'm
I don't
talking
know,
about?
but that sounds interesting.
I'm talking like a few hundred years ago, you know, like who it wasn't Freud, Walden, or
Freud. Oh
a writer, or somebody's going to remember. Somebody Google it and tell us. But this idea that like to get, you know, to have these like huge life-changing, altering concepts, you needed time to think and just to like walk outside and let it percolate. And it's like,
I disagree with that, man.
because also like, when am I getting this?
Talk to somebody with ADHD and you talk about they need time to come up with an idea. Yeah, I'll volunteer myself. Okay. Like, I don't know. I think those two things are mutually exclusive. Like, I don't think, like, I think time can prompt deep ideas. I don't think time is the only basis of ideas. Like, I think this amazing poet named Alok, I forget how to say their last name, but Alok is like this powerhouse, incredible, just thoughtful poet that talks through gender, trans ideas, and how we're all interconnected. And the things that they say is like, it doesn't need to make sense. It needs to make a sensation. And I'm like, yeah, like that is the point, right? It's not to be correct. It's not to like
interesting,
literally like feel like you're the smartest person in the room. It's to present ideas. And the only thing you need for a sensation is just a tap, right? Like just a poke. You don't need to wait 10 years to get poked, you know? Like you don't need to wait a year. You don't even need to wait a week, you know? Ideas manifest all the time. Sensations manifest all the time. And I think that like, sometimes people feel like, I think sometimes people conflate impatience with impulsive. Like I do think what we're trying to, I guess, discourage people to do is to feel impulsive and feel insatiable about things not working immediately. But I think impatience means that like, there's a desire to achieve this sooner in a way that is not really about carelessness, you know? Like, I think that's what sometimes people project onto people who want to have more tangible, immediate things. And I feel like on one end, yes, we cannot have time if we like in the studio to think and just be if we're rushed on time, but also like people are stressed. That is why they can't think. It's not because like people can't pay bills, people can't eat, people can't live, people can't buy their medicine, people can't get surgery, people literally cannot be. That is why. It's not because like, yeah, okay, sorry, you need to like shoot off the rocker.
Everybody knows that eventually the conversation will come around to healthcare. So like if anybody has listened to one episode of this podcast, they know that eventually it comes around to healthcare. We're just going to change the tagline.
Literally it's not just access to medical care, literally access to quality way of life. That is healthcare.
Oh, this is the point in which we either need to go down that rabbit hole or make a hard right turn.
Let's make a hard right because I already know I'm revving up and I think there's more beautiful things for us to discover than just rehashing what we already hate.
Fair enough. Also, it's too early in the morning for us to have a cocktail over this conversation.
It is. I'm trying to drink some ginger tea.
Oh, that's good of you. I'm definitely drinking caffeine. I want to talk about your podcast specifically and the conversations you're having over there, and for people to pop over in whatever app they're listening to go search Unraveling. Let's just hard right into that space.
Totally.
Because also what's fascinating to me, keeping things pragmatic, is how you have managed to also fund all these projects that you are doing in a way like...
They're not funded. Plot twist.
There we go. There's the answer. There's the $1 million question answer right there.
No, I think there's some depth there I can go. I think, okay, all right, I'm a parcel. One, all these projects, sometimes funded, sometimes not. Unraveling, I am grateful to have 13 patrons who pledge a certain amount of money, anywhere from $3 to $15 to support the project. I'm very grateful to everybody who just like has bought a tote bag to help support the making of season 2. I got an amazing grant from Cabo Clay at the beginning to start the project. So I'm definitely blessed and I'm grateful. It definitely doesn't add up to the labor I put in.
Healthcare.
But yeah, exactly. But I'm definitely grateful that people are pouring into this project. And I'm hoping that season 2, as I begin to roll out content, I'm going to put out a few episodes before season 2 actually launches. So to be more specific about Unraveling, I like to use the platform to talk about different ideas in the art world and make them accessible to anyone and everyone. I think sometimes art can feel very elitist and that people can't be a part of the conversation. So with the first season, art with a capital E for everyone, I like to use different ready-made resources like movies, music, books, whatever that felt relatable. So then people to make bigger ideas more tangible for folks. And so I had a range of people with different experiences, some quote unquote artists, some folks who just commit to making or commit to thinking about artistic ideas. And so I launched the project. Technically, I started the project in 2021, but I got sick. And so I was kind of recording while I was getting treatment simultaneously, which is kind of my best friend at Sal always says, Gerald, do you know how insane that is to be undergoing severe medical treatment and simultaneously recording episodes? And I'm just like, I don't know how to not do this.
When I see you out there doing that, I'm like, shit. I feel like a slug. I'm coming up. There's a myriad of words.
Like, I should be a measure stick, Rebecca. I think the medal of honor should not be going to me. I think there's a lot of capitalism, a lot of like pressure, like feeling inadequate. It's not good. I do appreciate that sentiment. I do want to receive that and tell you thank you, but I also like do not want to perpetuate harm. Do not do that. Actually,
I also want to make sure that you get rest.
Yes, I am trying to stop doing this, but Unraveling does feel different than other jobs. I feel like Unraveling feels like a way where all of my interests are showing up together. So my studio practice, my teaching practice, my curatorial practice, all of them are kind of like in one space, which feels very healing and affirming. Sometimes I feel like literally a chicken with its head cut off because I'm doing so many things. And sometimes people are like, how are you doing? Like, how do these coexist? How do you do these simultaneously? So I think Unraveling is a way to like be able to kind of paint that picture for them of how I see myself. But I think what I'm hoping to do with season 2 is to really connect with different people who really align with the vision of what I'm doing to fund producing a season. I think that is my ultimate goal and not just artists, right? Like, I think these ideas that I'm parceling through are going to take us out of the art world in a way that brings us into different professions to see the art in those professions. So to kind of link what craft ideas, what kind of ideas of fullness and wellness that we experience in ceramics and how that can exist and does exist in other fields that are not traditionally art. I'm raising a bar in terms of art is for everyone. So first season, bringing these different tools in so people can feel a part of this field, and then dismantling the fact that there is a field, right? And then like collecting all of this information from all these other professions to create more ways that affirm that people are already in the art world. And if they want to participate more, this is how you can think about that. I think ultimately I want to like use my travels, both in our country and potentially other places, to help further break that mold. So I'm hoping every season more molds get broken, but then also the net. I'm a big diagram person for anybody who does not know that. So if you think about concentric circles, you got this small circle that's the quote unquote art world. Then outside that is these professions that tap into that nature of art. And then outside that is like the world in which we live in and how art is just literally happening all the time around us,
See, and this is another example. I love it. I love it of where as you're talking, it's like you go from this very particular, like Unraveling as a podcast is a very specific project. And yet you open it up into this larger metaphysical, philosophical. I just love it. I love it. And I think that's awesome.
Thank you so much. Sometimes I'm like surprised by certain things like that. It's like, I would like to take credit that all of this is premeditated, but it's absolutely not. And half of it is making up as I go, but also it's just falling that rabbit hole, right? Like you're at the top of the hole and then you go deeper and you find these other things. So as you were talking, I thought you were going to literally like use the title as a verb. And it's like you're unraveling the art world.
I was like, oh shit, I am. I didn't even realize it.
You didn't choose that name on purpose?
No, half and half. So one, shout out to my best friend, Mar. We were talking about something on the way to the airport. I was dropping them off and they were talking about this sweater that they were making and how is the cuts of the, what's it called? The patterns, the cuts of the pattern of the sweater is not gender affirming anymore for them. So they're having to literally unravel and de-thread it to recreate it in a more affirming way. And I was like, oh shit, I think that's what I'm trying to do, like with ideas on the show. And then I was like, okay, I think that's what I want to name it. So it just literally became an idea about how we inherit things or how we see things that we like and then have to take them apart to then re-engage with them. But I didn't really like put that as like a bigger goal for unraveling the art world overall. I don't think I really saw that one coming, if I'm gonna be honest.
That's what I've thought of it as the whole time.
Yeah. Sometimes the work is ahead of you, Sometimes the work is ahead of you. And honestly, as a sculptor who works in ceramics where I am tired by the time I'm done with a sculpture, this is kind of satisfying where there's still more room to run when you get to the end of a thing. So
that's amazing. Oh my gosh. I do want to re-emphasize just because I think we glossed over it a little bit, not to like go back to the dark side, but I think you and I are very similar in the fact that we have our hands in so many different projects. And a lot of people look at that and say, oh, wow, look how amazing that is. How do you manage all of that? And like it gets rewarded over and over again mentally. And so then you're kind of like, oh, people are impressed by this. I have to keep doing this. And you keep doing it. And then there comes a point where you go, why the hell am I doing that? Like how, and so it's not, yes, we're genuinely interested in all of these things, but there's also this undercurrent of, I need to do this many things in order to make this life work and in order to pay the bills. And that is not a light thing to gloss over because, I think I wanted to make the point that it gets rewarded a lot in American society. And I for sure have been that person. And now I'm kind of unlearning it's not a good thing.
Yeah. Small anecdote. So as I mentioned, and I could just be transparent. Sometimes I just don't like to say my diagnosis up front and just in case people have trigger warning. So trigger warning, I'm a recent cancer survivor. And so immediately I was diagnosed and I had to be thrown into treatment because I was 25 at the time, 25 and a couple months at the time, and literally had less than a year to get cancer treatment because my health insurance is on through my mom's job. And so at 26, it would virtually probably be impossible to have gotten the care that I got because I didn't have help. I wouldn't have as good of support. And after I went through all my treatment, I was done. And I was pronounced in remission August 1st, 2022.
Ring that bell.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
And so immediately had to start thinking about jobs and how to sustain myself. Literally like a month after being pronounced in remission, I had totaled up to 5 jobs. So a recent cancer patient, bald as Caillou, is working 5 jobs. Okay.
Side note, Caillou's the most annoying cartoon on the planet, but
really, I loved it as a kid. I was like, his voice is kind of high, but I was into it. But
as a nanny, all Caillou's teaching anybody is to whine about all the things. The kids I watch that watch Caillou, not a good, that is not Sesame Street quality education right there.
Valid. But I was working on these jobs. And so, artists are often prompted as hustlers, right? Like jacks of all trades. Like we have the ability to do multiple things simultaneously in order to make ends meet.
And all that is ableism.
That's just what that is. It's like this inherent understanding that people have the capacity to meet this astronomical, ridiculous demand that capitalism puts on us. And that's just like something I was already aware of, but I was again, acutely aware of it coming out of treatment because I was dealing with physical changes to my body and my life and to balance the medical bills and other things that were kind of and left in limbo out in treatment. I had to acquire so many jobs. And so I think ultimately what I want to affirm for everybody is one, don't be hindered by the jack of all trades title in either. capacity. Like
Mhm.
one, if you are interested in multiple things, be interested in multiple things and chase those things because they will lead you to very beautiful places that you would not expect because of the Venn diagram of this thing and this thing coming together, producing a third thing that is really beautiful, right? But in the other way, don't feel like burdened by this idea that you need to be doing all these things in a way where like you are feeling inadequate if you're not. And if you can try to prioritize spaces that support your well-being so you don't have to do as many things as possible. I'm very grateful to, have this work from home job where I'm working with and seeking and around different ceramic artists every day. And that is like contributing to my mental health in a lot of ways. But in some ways, I was like teaching out at a Y. I was teaching in different cities. I was like doing online website development for somebody. Like I was just literally running around crazy. And so I think that ultimately this field has a way of, like you said, self-perpetuating this desire, both from us and from externally, and I want to like you said, put a pin in it and note that none of us should be doing this. This is not okay. This is not safe. This is not healthy. No, 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 no.
Yes. And like the thing that I've started to become acutely aware of this year is like the amount of mental exhaustion from context switching. And as a cis hetero white girl, like context switching is exhausting. So then we could add endless layers on top of that. But just even sitting at my computer switching and like, I know all the best practices. I try to implement them into my day in terms of like blocking out my schedule for specific tasks and not switching between them. Ebb and flow. Like there are seasons where I'm better and then there are seasons where I'm not. You got to allow yourself some flexibility. But like, even with all of that, I'm going for, so say I like block out a time of like, I'm going to handle emails now. So that's one task, right? That's supposed to be like, allows you to focus. I've got 4 different inboxes to check. And each of those are a different audience of people in which I need to communicate in a slightly different way, right? Like I can respond to your email in a totally different way than I'm going to respond to the couple who's getting married next weekend, and a totally different way on top of that to the restaurant who might want to order plates from us. And after like 13 years of doing this, I'm finally realizing, oh, that's exhausting.
Yeah, man. I do have like a day, like Thursdays are my long day where all my jobs collide. I like teach in Delaware at the Delaware Art Museum. I like dog walk and I like having single work. Salute. And going from thing to thing is quite exhausting. And it used to like back then when I was doing 5 jobs, I mean, I was literally at one job doing computer work for 2 jobs. I was combining all 3 in one place. It was getting too much.
I feel like I shouldn't have added my story at the end of yours because the way you just explained it previously like summed up our whole conversation, and I should have just put the bow there and been like, and that's it. But now I don't have a good follow-up or a good way to like wrap it up beautifully the way you said. I mean, we haven't even talked about your sculpture and making, and there's like so many different places.
There's often space I usually don't get to talk about my actual work because it's crazy. I'm grateful, and everything is my work, right? Like all these things are my work, but my actual ceramic or my installations, I usually I can do that at like an artist talk. But I would say just quick and dirty, my sculpture work is Descendants of Strange Fruit. I like to use this body of work to think through the layers of Blackness and how to honor both ancestral as well as current descendants of this metaphor, strange fruit. I typically use ceramic sculptures to create the bulk of the piece and then mixed media materials in the installation. See, even now, trying to switch between talking about unraveling and this is like, I'm like stuttering. One thing that I'm really excited about, like Mike and I were just talking about this on the phone, is one, I've actually been making utilitarian stuff, been making pots. I know, right? Yeah. I was hanging out with Paul Briggs and his summer. I was his assistant at Penland, which was absolutely a dream. I love working with him, learning from him. I was a student a couple years ago at Penland in 2018, and then I returned to kind of lead the same workshop as his assistant, which was really beautiful. Shout out to our friend Tariq Johnson, who was the other assistant as well. Paul, pinches all of these gorgeous sculptures from one ball of clay. And so I was challenging myself to kind of pinch, and it's similar dynamic, but not high relief things, just like different bowls. And then I started getting into pinching plates. I was really excited to I don't really make a lot of plates in general. It's not something I do, but I always have been fond of them. And the challenge of pinching a plate from one ball of clay has been very satisfying. Trying to create a form that feels really good in the hand, but then now I've been moving away and trying to pinch. So these are plates with feet, trying to pinch plates that could cut a steak. So have the stability to really like cut a steak. And so trying to map all that out has been really exciting. So that's one thing that's been really energizing in the studio, these plates. And then the other thing is making my sculptures with textile components. So I'm making these ceramic forms and then leaving openings where I would connect a textile piece. So I'm really excited about that. I've been scraping the internet for a more intuitive wet felting process to do because I don't think I have the brain to needle felt. God bless Stephanie Metz, who is like this awesome needle felting artist making gorgeous forms. I absolutely do not think I can. So for anybody who does not know, needle felting is where you have this wool and you basically got this needle and you're just stabbing it. And the stabbing allows the fibers to knot on each other. And then you're going from this soft blob to this more dense fiber form. It's quite beautiful, but I do not think I have.
Maybe not at the scale that you're envisioning.
I don't know, man. My ADHD feels like I've already tried it and I'm just like, it's not done yet. Like, I feel like I've stabbed it like at least 100 times and it's just like nowhere near what I want.
Nothing moved.
So wet felting is kind of like this process of using soap and water to kind of knot the fibers up. So I'm hoping to try to use a process that will make knotting the fibers up more intuitively. So I'm like kind of shaping it and using wire armatures and then wet felting around them. So we'll see. I don't know. I haven't done it yet, but this is like a projection. So by the time y'all are listening to this, I have already tried it and I can tell you if it does not work.
I love it.
I want to create a soft component to the ceramic work. So like if I'm honoring, the ranges of Blackness, ceramics has this beautiful, intuitive, indiscernible curves and features that I like. I think Blackness sometimes is often restricted to this hard exterior. And so being able to have components that are soft, I think breaks up that mental understanding of what this form can be and how it should exist. And so I'm really excited about bringing in new components. For anybody who knows my work, I'm trying to glaze stuff. Wish me luck. I don't glaze really. I typically really enjoy the rich surface of the clay and like typically using terracotta or indulging in
Spray paint surfaces because you don't need to eat off of them.
But I think that there's like a choice that I am making when I'm not engaging in glaze. And I just want to make sure I'm making that choice out of concept versus habit or fear.
Or annoyance, if you're me. I work so hard to get like the form that I'm thrilled about, and then the glaze ruins it. So I'm like, well, shit.
Yeah. I like to think of glazing as like the backup dancer. The backup dancer should not be louder than the main singer or the main dancer. I think it should either be like neck and neck or just not, it does not distract from the form at all. Like it should just.
I want to put you and Stephen Hill in a room together and see how that goes down.
Let's try it. I'm down to come back.
Or I don't know, like John Britt or somebody. Like I'm trying to think of the people that are like known for glazing. And I just think it would be a really entertaining.
I'm just like, find a better clay body and do the thing you needed to do. Nah, I think there's something really beautiful there. And obviously I love glaze because I have a bunch of pots that all have glaze on them. So I really enjoy how the surface is intersecting with the form. I just haven't figured that out with my own work. But I think a person that I really enjoy, of course, Paul Briggs, but Sid Carpenter, like the way Sid marries that surface. A lot of her surfaces are dry and or are cold finishes, but I think that there's an experimentation with color that she's like not afraid of. Yeah, a few other people I'm thinking of too, that Malcolm Mobutu Smith, some other really like dope people that I think really aren't afraid of color and surface and invite that in. And it doesn't detract from the form at all. If anything, it makes you more excited about the form. I think Malcolm is really good about that.
That's something Francesco talks about all the time. And exactly why I thought of Stephen Hill's stuff right away is like what I was just about to say. I don't think traditional education in the arts is a mandatory thing at all. But I think when those of us who are picking all of this up in adulthood and outside of a traditional structure, we get to pick and choose what we want to learn. And so you can skip over certain things that can be really helpful and formative in that process in terms of like thinking, like I'd never, up until like, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, I didn't think that much about how I was choosing glazes for forms. I made a form that I liked, and then I picked a glaze that I liked, and I put them together. That doesn't mean that they were best together, right? Like, and so it's some of those things that I feel like we don't, when those of us who are like kind of playing around and whatever, exploring, hobby, no judge, like there's no good or bad here. It's just like, oh, then when you do have that conversation with somebody, you can't unsee that anymore, right? It's like, oh, that's why that piece speaks to me so much, because that surface treatment goes with that shape and it heightens that shape and it, you know. So.
Yeah, I think and maybe this will make somebody else out there feel good. When I was in undergrad, I just was rebellious. You know, I learned things long enough to break the rules.
That's probably just by nature who I am.
But I think that discovery is important, you know, and sometimes when you're in academia, you're not able to discover, and vice versa. If you learn it on your own, you're limited to whatever you can buy or what is in your close proximity. So I think the crime of both aspects is
lack of discovery and being able to figure out what fits best for you.
One thing that I try to encourage my students is that, you know, do what feels good naturally and then dig deeper into it. You know, I try to use the analogy of like me learning how to cook. My desire, I'm not at all by any means a really amazing cook, but I really like trying different flavors and pairing them together. And I think that started with just very simple things, right? What is the best scrambled eggs ever, right? What is the best turkey sandwich panini ever, right? And then running the gamut of like the combinations I can do in this very small window. And sometimes we think we need to like cook duck a l'orange to like figure out palate and crap like that, right? But like, if you just take something that you already really love and try to dig deeper into it, you'll figure out more about yourself and about the process in a very sustainable way. And so to bring it out, back to ceramics, you know, one student really loves bowls. I was like, okay, you love bowls. You're not really into cups right now or plates or whatever. All right, what do you think is a bowl for this setting? What do you think is a bowl for this? What do you think is this? And so like leaning into something you already like, so then you can have the confidence and the courage to discover and to fail, you know? And so I think the crime of both of those things, like I said, it's not necessarily one place is better than others. It's just like lack of ability to discover and find what really works for you.
What I hear when you talk about like picking something that you like and digging deeper, I also think of I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember it exactly, but the idea around like the way to push yourself creatively is actually in having limitations as opposed to having a blank canvas.
Yep.
Right? Like being forced to figure out how to work within limitations actually pushes you to think of something new instead of like, okay, well, you can do anything you want, go for it. Yeah, you don't really go anywhere interesting sometimes.
Yeah, and you'll be surprised all the information that you acquire in that setting where you were feeling satisfied of a challenge. How that's immediately translatable. Like another example when I'm teaching is I like to teach throwing and hand building simultaneously. Like I like start with hand building and then immediately I pivot to throwing. So that relationship between those two processes are inherently connected from jump. And then students typically lean towards one or the other. And what I try to use in that scenario is because a few of my students have taken multiple classes with me, I'll say, okay, you've done this thing in hand building. Now let's try to think about how you can use those skill sets in the other one. Or they'll come to me and say like, I really can't, if they're a thrower, they're like, I really can't understand what I need to do to make this thing in hand building. I use what they already know to help break that other thing down. So I think being able to use your own interest as the driving force, but within limitations, can help you achieve way more distance than feeling like you said, this open-ended of where to go, how to go, and then pressure of like, is this the right way? I'm like, there is no right way.
Whatever your interests are, that is the right way.
I almost think this feels full circle as well, because we've been talking about how you and I are both involved in all these disparate things out of necessity, but also there's some genuine interest in all these disparate things, and that a lot of people feel like they have to pick a thing I also think like what you're saying right now makes me think of this notion that like when we have all of these different experiences and we've done a lot of disparate things, that Venn diagram you talked about earlier, that it all comes together where you get to create something uniquely yours because you have these different things going on. Same idea in between moving, between hand building and throwing and different making experiences as well.
Yes, man, I'm really letting my personality be seen. I really love cooking shows. My favorite one that I'm watching is MasterChef. I do like Chopped as well, but MasterChef, what I really enjoy seeing with different contestants is like sometimes they'll have to cook to a very specific culinary cuisine or very specific ingredients that are related to a culinary cuisine. And what the judges are always looking for is how do they show up on a plate? How do either their ethnicity or their introduction to cooking or whatever that is tied to their path shows up in relationship to the prompt, the limitation, or the other content that they're engaging with. And then they produce this beautiful plate that is an amalgamation of all those things together. So I really enjoy those kind of projects the most. I think that there is a lot of how-to books or how-to podcasts, but when you're able to combine all these different interests, that not only reframes, I mean, essentially we're all doing how to live life, essentially. But you're able to create something that is unique, nuanced, and like far more interesting in a way that can bring people into your life that can be similar to something else, but doesn't take away from what you do, you know?
Yes, that's it. I'm not adding anything. That's the mic drop. That's the end. A temporary end, because I'm sure we will have other conversations.
Yes.
I can't even believe we're thinking about NCECA already. I was going to say people can meet you in person if they're coming. It feels so far away. And yet...
Yeah, it's going to be March 20th through the 24th, I think. Yeah, it's actually not going to be during St. Patrick's Day, which is like, I feel like every year we're battling for space
with people celebrating St. Patrick's Day.
Space, and also for people who have to fly, like travel prices. If we could avoid holidays for the sake of travel, especially for those of us trying to fly in and out of Chicago around St. Patrick's Day, can we just not?
Yeah, so it's gonna be Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. It's gonna be super exciting. You can come say what's up. I also live in Philadelphia. I drive around different places, so I'm down to connect with people. Feel free to follow me at Gerald Brown Art website, geraldbrownart.com. Unraveling is just through both those same channels. So feel free to reach out. I love being able to connect with people, and
yeah, if we are in the same city, let's link up.
Love it. Now, I told you that was going to be full of big questions and deep philosophical thoughts around work, right? I did give you that disclaimer at the very beginning, so don't say I didn't warn you. I love how anytime Gerald and I have ever chatted, she gets me thinking so much deeper than the pragmatic level my brain typically just sits in. And frankly, it's conversations like this that the internet isn't really built for. I can't discuss the meaning of work and the ways in which I've built multiple businesses because I've felt like I needed to in order to keep things afloat in something like an Instagram caption or a 90-second reel or a comment. Those spaces just aren't built for that. And as amazing as social media can be for connecting us with seemingly endless numbers of other people from all over the globe, when we want to dive deeper and take the time to have a meaningful conversation with someone else, well, something feels like it's missing in those platforms, right? I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, and as much as it might sound like a pitch, I truly just can't sum up how special the makers inside of our community are. It's inside of this special place where I personally am able to have these bigger conversations that I've been craving as well. Before I have a chance to sit down and summarize the lessons learned in beautiful hindsight about a recent market on what will be the next episode of our launch series, I've already logged into the community and feel encouraged to get back out there and do another show after, frankly, the last one was almost a total flop. Now, that's a true story, and that summary is indeed coming up on a future episode soon. But I bring up the community once again right now because I'm preparing a lot of exciting things for the new year. Things like bringing in outside experts in fields such as Instagram strategy and finding your unique artist's voice to host one-off masterclasses and events inside of the community. But to be honest, hosting experts means we're going to need to make some changes to make sure that those experts are paid for their time. In other words, in the new year, the cost of the community membership will be going up just a little bit so that we can keep this amazing space thriving and growing with new and improved resources. Long story short, if you've been thinking about joining or even want to take a peek to see if it might be the right place for you, now is the time. And I know there's a lot of other stuff going on. There is still a 2-week free trial, and anyone who's currently a member will still keep their membership rates even when the prices change. In other words, if you join now this year, you won't have the price change next year. Come check out what it's all about at makersplaybook.com/community. I'm prepping some exciting things to kick off the new year, and while I hate all of the consumerism around resolutions and all that stuff, I definitely have never accomplished a goal without a system. So first off, inside of the community in late January, maybe early February, because let's be honest, I think everyone needs a little time to breathe after the holidays, right? No one's kicking off resolutions on January 1st. It's more like February 1st. I'll be hosting a co-working day that walks through exactly how I set, and more importantly, keep track of my own goals, big and small. Ones that take a few years, one that takes a couple months, ones that take a week. I'm sharing that whole system in a co-working day together with each other so that we can actually accomplish the things that get us one step closer, big or small, to this dream of making a living from the things we make. If you're curious, snag our lower membership rates while they still last by visiting makersplaybook.com/community. All right, that's as close to an end of the year sales jargon talk as I will ever get. So enough of that. Most of all, whether these conversations are happening online with fellow makers in a place like the community, or whether you have your own crew of people already, in person or online, wherever you are in the world, I hope that you have others that you can lean on when the days are hard, and people that you can celebrate with when things succeed beyond your wildest dreams, because both things will happen. I hope that it's people you don't have to explain yourself to when putting something in the mail feels really stressful and your breathing doesn't actually return to normal until you get that happy photo and thrilled message from the customer who you shipped it to. Because let's be honest, our makers' lives are not the norm. And at the same time, that's a really beautiful thing. Once again, this episode was made possible in part thanks to our sponsor, Amico.
Hello, I'm Bryce, Account Manager and Sales Solution Supervisor at Amico Brett, providing you with the best customer service in ceramics. This episode is brought to you by Amico Brett. Find Amico glazes and equipment at your local distributor. Welcome to Clay, and thank you for listening.
Audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Kotzfan, with promotional material assistance from Queenie Maliki. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. Until next time, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality, because together, we've got this.